Okay, then thanks and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to have you here for this session on the Global Development Assistance Program. My name is Christoph Aubrecht. I'm in charge of managing the GDA program, and I'll be happy to present you and offer you some insights into where we stand, where there are further opportunities for the industry to engage, and the objectives and next steps in the program. Obviously, we have also bilaterals scheduled for tomorrow. There are still a few slots left. So if this presentation sparks your interest, then please sign up and we can have a chat tomorrow for further details. Okay, a brief history. Where do we come from with the GDA program? So this slide actually illustrates the last 10 plus years of engagement that ESA has had with international financial institutions, specifically with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, but also institutions such as the IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, and others. So we started back in 2008 with the EO World program or initiative, a set of small-scale demonstration projects to raise awareness with IFI stakeholders. And that actually led to the launch of the EO4SD initiative, the Earth Observation for Sustainable Development initiative, which many of you probably are familiar with. It kicked off in 2016 and it is still ongoing, though we have only one thematic cluster, the one focused on forest management, still active. All other 7 clusters have concluded by now. And we still have also the EO Clinic and the EO4SD Lab running this year, but we are now really in full swing moving towards the next phase, which is the GDA program. So GDA is to be seen as an evolution to EO4SD, but still actually presents a new way of engaging with our partners. And I will illustrate a little bit what I mean with that. It's important to understand that GDA is not a standalone ESA program, so to say, but it actually contributes to a broader initiative that is jointly implemented with our partners. And jointly implemented also means that resources are mobilized on the side of the IFIs to complement the activities in GDA. The ultimate objective is really to mainstream the use of satellite Earth observation and derived services, analytics, information products into development operations and also financing. So day-to-day standard practices, make it something normal, and transfer the skills and capabilities that we have in the European ecosystem into these working practices and also into the setups in developing countries that the IFIs engage with. Over the last 10 plus years, we have engaged with basically more than 100 of you, 100 service providers from basically all our member states. And this is really crucial, not just considering the direct one-on-one engagement between the service provider and ESA on a specific project, but more importantly, I would say also because this actually comes up or results in a consolidated roster of vetted companies that the IFIs know they can be happy to work with, who have experience, and in that sense, it lowers this initial entry and engagement barrier that industry has when it comes to working with IFIs. Technical developments alone usually don't, or almost always don't, solve the problems and challenges that IFIs and client stakeholders in developing countries face. So we have increasingly focused also on building capacity associated to those technical developments and technical services. In EO4SD, we've put a lot of effort on that across all the different thematic areas. And part of this has been online, obviously also over the last years with COVID, in-person engagement was increasingly difficult. But before that, we did stakeholder workshops on the ground in the countries. Client engagement was really high on top of the agenda. That is actually one of the, I would say, things that distinguished EU4SD particularly from the previous engagements. So we covered the whole value chain from stakeholder engagement, requirements assessment, service development, service delivery, and capacity building. And the lessons we learned from that type of engagement really now feed into the way we structured GDA and the way GDA is integrated with other programs in our IFI partners. So how do we do that? How do we now move from pilot to the mainstreaming objective that GDA has as an underlying goal? So GDA, a few kind of numbers, figures. We have currently 13 ESA participating states. GDA is a standalone program in the ESA context, part of Earthwatch. So in that sense has also moved closer to pre-operational setting compared to the EU4SD setup, which was still part of the envelope. It was initially set up for 5 years, so runs till end of 2025 at this point. It contributes to the broader Space for IDA partnership with our IFI partners, World Bank and ADB, to get started. Thanks to GDA, we have mobilized more than $100 million by now, which consists of both space and development finance, and I'll get back to that. And it is really a launch of something new in a sense, because the engagement process has pretty much changed and advanced compared to the previous years and previous initiatives. I usually list those 5 A's to frame the whole narrative. Obviously, availability and accessibility of data is being addressed and has been addressed through Copernicus a lot. So this is a real game changer for development. So we focus primarily on those 3 A's on the right. Awareness raising is a crucial thing we've been doing for more than 10 years by now. EU4SD, I would say, has focused increasingly also on raising the acceptance level in IFIs and client countries. And with GDA, we now try to make that next step towards full adoption of the use of satellite EO in development practices and operations. So that also means that we need to go beyond capacity building and actually integrate skills transfer activities in the programmatic approach at the banks. In a sense, really engage the local communities in the developing countries, foster growth of local digital economies, foster setup of EO ecosystems, service provider ecosystems in those countries, engage with educational institutions, etc. So really both bottom up and top down. So this doesn't happen from one day to the other, obviously, it's a process. And we try to support this from ESA side with a pretty comprehensive approach. So the GDA program team, in fact, is spread out across different locations. The bulk of us are based here in Esrin, but we have colleagues both in ESTEC and in EXAT who manage part of the activities in GDA. And we have ESA secondees or representatives based at the World Bank and at the Asian Development Bank who help us coordinate all the activities. So if I, can introduce you to a brief timeline in terms of how this whole GDA program started. Back in 2018, we had the first few exploratory meetings to start discussion on Earth observation and official development assistance with interested agencies, both national development agencies, but also the banks, OECD, DG DEFCO, now INTPA. This then, by the end of 2018, resulted in a fairly clear picture of where we wanted to go. And eventually in November 2019, GDA was formally established at Space 19 Plus at the Ministerial Council meeting with this initial subscription by 13 ESA member states. The member states that are currently participating in the program are listed here. And obviously we are also in discussion with member states that are not yet part of the program, whether it may make sense for them to join and bring in their national strategic priorities to the program. This is a broad overview, kind of programmatic overview on GDA. We consider the GDA AID activity line in the center, AID standing for Agile EO Information Development, and we've had a number of ITTs over the last year come out and first activities starting also. I'll refer to that on the next slide. But in addition to GDA 8, we also have a number of kind of programmatic support activities or complementary activities that are essential to make GDA work. One of it that has already kicked off is the dedicated action on monitoring, the evaluation and impact assessment. So this looks really at how are we doing with GDA and also how are we doing with the integration in IFI programmatic approaches, and what kind of impact are we generating both in the client countries, in the systematic thinking of IFIs, and also with the service provision ecosystem in uptake and adoption. Then we have a knowledge hub that we are about to launch the ITT still before summer. We have something called the Analytics and Processing Platform, which is in a sense a follow-up to the EO4SD lab, and a fast EO co-financing facility, which could be understood as a follow-up to the currently still active EO clinic. So if you look at the GDA 8 activity line, so this is the thematic sectors that we are currently addressing, or basically those sectors have been approved in the GDA work plan. There are obviously plans to address further sectors further down the line, and I'll show you that in a second. Where do we stand? The first activities that have already been kicked off are focused on disaster resilience, climate resilience, fragility, conflict and security, as well as urban sustainability. We have marine environment, blue economy, as well as agriculture currently under evaluation. And the other thematic sectors are kicking or having their ITTs launched very soon. The M&E contract started already in January, and we're about to launch another ITT focused on impact communications for the program. So if we look at what's to come, we have now the next ITT that goes out under the GDA 8 activity line is focusing on clean energy. This will be released, if everything goes well, by the end of this month. It's again for 1.5 years and 1.5 million euros, as with all the other GDA 8 ITTs. And then water resources is to follow in Q2, most likely in ITT to be released in June. And these are a few candidate sectors that we may address in 2023. We have forests, obviously, which is high on the list, but we have still EO4SD forests ongoing, so this will be positioned to follow up on that activity. And then there are interesting cases like transport and infrastructure, health, but also something at the nexus of climate and security, and pollution, poverty could be further sectors to address. I mentioned the knowledge hub, so this will be a 1 million euro activity, for which we plan to release the ITT also still before summer. We have the Analytics and Processing Platform, again 1 million ITT planned later this year, and similarly for FFF, the Fast EO co-financing facility, where the ITT is also planned for the second half of 2022, so that we can ensure a smooth transition from the EO clinic. Further information on all these activities, will be released in due time, but maybe on the Knowledge Hub, because that's the next one. We plan to set this up not just as a collection of resources, as a collection of services that have been developed, but we try to go maybe a step further and also offer guidelines to IFIs and client countries, developing country stakeholders, on how to build capacity on those EO services, and potentially even integrate an accreditation element, which could raise motivation and engagement. If we look at the broader space for IDA context, so GDA plus the aligned activities that the IFIs put in place, actually both World Bank and Asian Development Bank have by now put in place dedicated programmatic structures to complement GDA. The World Bank launched after summer 2021 the new global program called Digital Earth Partnership, and ADB launched a new EO program for development and digital transformation, both of which help with coordination and resource mobilization, and also with fostering integration into operational thinking in the banks and programmatic alignment with other programs. The idea is to expand beyond World Bank and ADB and include other partners. The next ones will be IFAD and the African Development Bank, and there are ongoing discussions with other relevant entities as well. If we look at the programmatic framework, and I will spend a little bit of time on this slide because I think it's important for you as a service industry to understand how these things work together. We have the two sides. We have the space finance side, if you will, and the development finance side. And the idea would be that on the space finance side, obviously that's GDA, we focus on knowledge developments. So that means new technical developments, but demand-driven, so in direct response to requests that we receive from our IFI partners. And then the development finance side will complement that and focus on associated capacity building and skills transfer activities initially, but further down the line also on operationalizing and bringing things to scale that we develop on the GDA side. So if I use the World Bank as an example, they established this Digital Earth Partnership global program, and they have several mandates. First of all, to launch a new dedicated trust fund and mobilize new dedicated development finance to fuel this program. It received initial seed financing from other sources and is now fully operational. It will also coordinate with other programs to ensure that there's alignment. If we look at certain sector topics such as, I don't know, forest, blue economy, disaster, urban, so that programs that the banks have in place on these topics also consider aligning part of their resources to what we do in GDA. And then the ultimate goal is, of course, also to mainstream into development operations. So that means investment, project financing, lending operations, credits, etc. And all of this in the background is linked to ongoing or projects that are in the pipeline. So if we do this well, and I should say that both of these elements don't really work without the other. So they depend on each other. We depend on the demand that is channeled through our partners in terms of requirements for technical developments, for integration of EO services, and they depend on our input on the technical development side. On ESA's side, we try to also leverage other ESA programs and initiatives that you've either heard about already or will still hear about today. As an example, I just list here EU Africa, Future EO, but also the Climate Change Initiative, which we collaborate with closely. And if we do that well, then we can make this next step towards adoption, and we can actually facilitate operationalization and scaling of the use of satellite EO, and in turn then offer further opportunities also for the EO service industry. This is just an example of programs that have committed to programmatically align resources to what we do in GDA, and I believe these slides will be shared, so I will not go into it in detail. But this is the World Bank example. We have Alex Chunet as our representative there, help us coordinate. And on the Asian Development Bank side, similarly, there's a number of programs and funds that have aligned resources with us, and we have Paolo Manunta at ADB helping us facilitating coordination. And it's important to understand that through the engagement in all these programmatically aligned resources, actually all GDA participating states, and in fact all ESA member states, have actually contributed to these programmatically aligned development finance instruments through their respective ODA ministries. So in that sense, with GDA, we try to facilitate and foster a national consolidation of space and development strategic priorities, and work with both sides to bring them closer to each other and ideally speak with one voice also towards the IFIs. So this slide is, I guess, my last one, is some recent news. We've been quite active across a number of domains and with all the different partners, as you can see. And if you want further context on GDA, I encourage you to click the link that is listed here below and have a look at this video, which really introduces the Space for IDA initiative at a broad level, with contributions, high-level management contributions, both from ESA and from our IFI partners that you see here pictured. So I leave you with this final quote. Basically, we are trying to get ourselves on the road to full adoption. And the current Vice President on Sustainable Development at the World Bank, Jürgen Vögele, basically states that they have all of us have always been fascinated by the potential that this technology gives us. And with this technology, obviously, he refers to Earth observation. But now it goes beyond the fascination, and we're actually entering a stage where we can turn these beautiful images into real management decisions. And that's really what we try to do here. We try to position you, the service industry, and collective European capabilities to play a major role in making this happen and in facilitating and accelerating impact both in the IFI ecosystems and in developing countries. So thanks a lot. I guess we still have a little bit of time for questions, as I understand. So I don't know how the question session is handled, but I see first questions coming in the chat. If my country is not part of the 13, can we participate? So the answer is at this point, no. Only entities from participating states, GDA participating states, can bid for GDA ITTs. So that's the situation. We are obviously trying to bring on board those member states that are not yet participating in the program, but it's a subscription-based approach, and obviously every member state has to make this decision. But clearly, if there is big demand from the industry within a country, then this could help signal the interests to the delegations and to the member states to hopefully join. A short word on the geo-return situation, please. Okay. I would say that, we have now launched 4 GDA 8 activities plus the M&E contract. So these are 5 contracts. And we have a critical situation on geo-return in the UK, which is over-return. So you may have seen some clauses in the most recent GDA ITTs that limit participation of UK industry in upcoming ITTs. Obviously, we are trying to look into the situation if this can be solved and see if the UK could potentially increase its subscription, but this is in discussion. With other member states, all are still fully so to say, eligible to participate. Maybe it's important to understand that the balance within the subscription is important. So Germany is by far the biggest participating state at the level of 10 million euros. And then we have Spain following with 5 million, Italy with 3 million, and the remaining participating states are at 2 million or below. I hope I answered that question. Obviously, if it's on a specific country, we'd have to discuss this separately. Did I understand correctly that GDA M&E is cancelled? No, that's a misunderstanding. GDA M&E actually kicked off in January, so it's fully up and running right now, and will run for the lifetime of the program, so to say. There is no activity that is cancelled. The only one that is slightly delayed is the dedicated action on impact communications. But also for that one, I hope that we can get out the ITT fairly soon, certainly within the next 1 or 2 months. Okay, so that's the questions I see so far. Is the Impact Communications ITT the same that was presented at last year's event? Probably. Last year's event, we also went through all the ITTs, and obviously we listed that there was a communications focused ITT planned. So that's the same one. It's just now slightly reworded. So yeah, it's probably the same one that you saw last year. The thinking behind it has advanced, which also impacts the way the other contracts are implemented, including the GDA 8 contracts. For example, at this point or at the beginning, all the GDA 8 contracts were expected to put up their own websites, web portals. Now this will be much more centralized. The whole communication strategy of GDA will be more centralized. So we have a GDA web portal, which hopefully will actually be released over the next few weeks. And then basically all GDA activities, actions, contracts will feed into this central web portal. Which are the requirements to submit to the ITTs? This is a fairly general question. It depends on the ITT, I would say. So, I mean, there are formal requirements, like what we've heard in terms of being an entity registered in a GDA participating state. But then, obviously, for every individual ITT, we have specific requirements or expectations on the consortium composition, on expertise, profiles, etc. So for GDA 8, for example, as this is kind of the bulk of the activities, we always try to have a consortium that goes beyond the classical EO service provider ecosystem and also integrates sector-specific expertise, development assistance expertise, because it will enable us to position the whole thing as a package much more effectively rather than trying to squeeze in only the EO component into large-scale IFI programs. So we try to be a little bit more agile in that sense. That's on the consortium composition. Other requirements, well, I think on the formal side, it's clear, and on the expectation for expertise, it's also fairly clear. I don't know if there are other elements to that question that I could answer. We have 2 more minutes, I understand, before we move to the next slot. So if there are any further questions, please let me know. As I mentioned, we have still a few slots available for tomorrow's bilaterals. So if you have anything else that you would like to discuss, that's your chance. And yeah, I think we will share the slide pack so you can actually go back to that and let me know if there's anything unclear still afterwards. Feel free to also reach out to me. So I don't see any further questions come in. If that's the case, then I would say thanks a lot for your interest, and I hope to, have further good engagement of the industry in our upcoming ITTs, and there are lots of opportunities for you to engage with us and in turn with development banks and developing countries. So I pass on, I believe, to Susanne, and yeah, thanks again.
Yes, good afternoon. So I'm taking over for the next presentation. Can somebody confirm that you can actually see it, or?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Do you see it now?
Could you please put the presentation mode? Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So yes, I would like to brief you a little bit on what we are currently doing in the Climate Change Initiative, the sort of current plan, but also most importantly, the future new climate change initiative that we're planning to be presented at the next Ministerial Council towards the end of this year. Now, the first part will sort of focus on what we're doing now, and the second part will focus on what we are suggesting for the Ministerial Council proposal at the end of this year. Climate Change Initiative, the main focus is, of course, on quantifying climate indicators, so-called essential climate variables. These have been defined in the Global Climate Observing System Implementation Plan in 2016, which is currently actually updated. And these ECVs need to be relevant, feasible, and cost-effective. So far, there have been 54 of them being put forward. About a little bit more than a half can actually be quantified using space data, and in the Climate Office, we are currently addressing 21 of them. And that has something to do with, their maturity. So, for example, salinity is one of them, but only since about 10 years we have space-based data for this particular variable. So this is why we haven't actually done it right at the beginning, but we only started recently with this. And there's, of course, also budgetary consideration on this one. The Climate Office, maybe to just explain a little bit who we are. We are called the focal point for climate activities in ESA. If you really think about it, of course, 99% of what we're doing in the Earth Observation Program is related to climate in terms of developing satellite missions that provide the observations for our climate data records, but also, as we've just heard from other colleagues, in using these data for climate relevant applications. We are having a sort of political role, I think, in representing ESA's interest in the International Climate Network, which is a very large network comprising a number of organizations that look at requirements definition, like for instance GCOS or the World Climate Research Program, on policy definition like UNFCCC and IPCC, and other stakeholders that we are working with who have a different focus for their activities in terms of climate, but also we are working with climate services and scientific groups to provide the specific evidence there. We are also an observer to IPCC and UNFCCC since a couple of years. Our flagship program, and this is what I would like to update you here on, is the Climate Change Initiative, which has been running since over a decade now, very successfully, and we are planning to extend it beyond the current program up to 2029. And we also, since actually the 1st of March, the host for the World Climate Research Program's Coupled Model Intercomparison project office, and we are implementing that as we speak. And we have a very close collaboration to all the network of Future Earth through, for example, having a secondee in our office. On the right-hand side, you see, excuse me, you see the ECVs that we have implemented so far. You will find these data online as well. In addition to looking at the individual ECVs, we are also looking at cross ECV applications and programs. So we're making a very clear link to the climate modeling community. So us being the climate observation community, I think it's very important to make that link to the modeling community, which is also featuring very highly in the IPCC reports that have been released also recently. We're also looking at other cross ECV projects, like for instance RECAP, which is currently running, which is looking at quantifying the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and comparing the approaches from bottom up, as it is mostly done by most of our member states, to top down, basically using satellite data, and how we can actually support the emission reporting towards the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. Now, if you're interested in our data, you can go to our open data portal. On the right-hand side, you see all the different, our dashboard essentially. So if you click on these bars there, you will get a number of supplementary information to the data sets that you will find there. Access is free and open. We have, when appropriate, global coverage there. We have long-term series, some of them even longer than 30 years. And we do a very stringent quality check on these data. So we have uncertainty characterization, and we also make them cross ECV consistent, which is very important for our modeling community there. So I'd like to invite you to have a look at these data sets there, and they are openly available. They're also traceably back to the Climate Data Store from our operational counterpart, the Copernicus Climate Change Service. So you will find explanations of how these different data sets actually relate to each other. Talking of operational services, we are working very closely with other Copernicus services apart from the Copernicus Climate Change Service, with whom we have a very close relationship and agreement. We're also starting to talk to our operational counterparts, especially in the marine, atmosphere, and land areas, which is something that we will really put some more emphasis on in coming months. In particular, the collaboration with the Copernicus Climate Change Service is very successful. From our 21 ECVs, we have so far transferred 16 to C3S. We are sharing with them a very close dialogue on what we are supporting them with in terms of R&D and pre-operational development, but we're also talking to them not only on scientific aspects, but also on more technical aspects, like, for instance, data interoperability, quality assurance. We are, as I said, signposting the different data provenances on the CDS and Open Data Portal, and we are providing very detailed information to our users on either side. I think I've already covered this one, maybe just to say that the main points of discussion that came out in terms of common R&D with C3S were focusing on including new ECVs possibly in the future in their program. In particular, they were mentioning biomass, permafrost, and land surface temperature. They're also very interested to work with us on the link to the modeling community. And here, the two data sets that are of most importance to them are root zone, soil moisture, and vegetation, both of which we have recently published. Vegetation was an ITT, which has now been awarded. Root zone, soil moisture, we have added on to our existing project on soil moisture there. And there's new topics that we haven't actually been pursuing in CCI, neither in C3S. The new ones here being biodiversity, which is probably quite a difficult task in many ways, because it's not just a single variable, and also other things like terrestrial hydrology and river discharge. As I said at the beginning, we are also now hosting, since the beginning of March, the World Climate Research Program's Coupled Model into Comparison project. We've just selected the supplier for this service, and the office is starting to work. The director and the two program officer and the communication science officer have been appointed, and the director is already in place, and the other two contractors will start throughout the month of March, essentially. So that's very important for us, because that really provides that very close link between the climate science, observation, and modeling communities, which is probably a link that we need to strengthen in the future even more, partly to basically validate and verify what climate models are doing, of running model runs in the past, but also to ensure model enhancements in the future, so that we can have more secure projections and predictions of climate scenarios into the future, which is important for our mitigation and adaptation strategies worldwide. We also have a very close link to the Future Earth. As I said, we have a secondee in our climate office at ESA, and that really provides a very close link to the various different organizations that come under the umbrella of Future Earth, and that's very important for us as well. Maybe a word on sort of success and uptake of our data. As you know, the IPCC report Working Group 1 was published in August last year, and we just saw the publication of Working Group 2 assessment report a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And in both we are figuring quite prominently from our CCI program. I think we basically confirm what we've seen in previous reports, but we also realized in these reports that warming is actually accelerating, and that's a major new insight into climate science that we gathered from these reviews. But one of the interesting parts in the most recent releases was also that there is an increased uptake of Earth observation data and new methodologies, which has actually contributed to updating our understanding of how warming is actually accelerating as well. And that's a very important message to say, that satellite data, Earth observation data are becoming more and more important in these assessments. Here, maybe a little bit of a quantitative assessment of this one, comparing the IPCC 6th assessment report with the 5th assessment report that came out in 2014. Of course, in 2014, we were just about in existence, so many things hadn't been published by that time, and the cutoff point for publications to be entering IPCC reports is usually a year or two before the report is published. So we weren't actually quite there yet, but we have been scoring very highly in the most recent report with many citations, and also from our CCI community contributing with many authors, reviewers, or lead authors in the most recent Working Group 1 IPCC report. I'd like to make you aware also of the new website that we have since about a year now, and it's continuously populated with new information. You will find a lot of briefing notes, and here on the right-hand side you also see the Climate on Space application, which you can use if you have any need for communication, education, and outreach material that you can see there. Now, coming to the activities that we're doing at the moment, we are in the second phase of CCI Plus since about a year now. We are currently extending the contracts for the existing CCI projects that are ongoing. Most of them are direct negotiation, which is clear in the philosophy of CCI. We selected the new consortia at the beginning of CCI Plus for the new ECVs, and we are now extending them into the second phase. The second phase will go from the begin off with a round robin to actually decide on the right scientific approach and round robins and ATPDs now to the more, let's say, pre-operational deployment of these data sets. We have, though, also released some new ITTs, vegetation parameters, which has been selected and has been kicked off. Will be kicked off in a week, I think. And we also have had an ITT out for precursors for aerosol and ozone, which is now closed, and we are currently in the selection process. Sometime later this year, we will see a further ITT on long-lived greenhouse gases, which should come out in the second or third quarter of this year. We have also selected our CCI research fellows. So these are not on-site research fellows, but research fellows that we are placing in our counterpart organizations. And the next call is planned for 2023, so in about a year's time, when probably the focus of that new call, and we are usually establishing around 10 new research fellows, will be maybe a little bit more on modeling activities there as well to support our CMIP collaboration. I've already said that we established the WCICMIP intercomparison project, international project office at ESA, started at the 1st of May, and we will see new activities coming out of this one, and we are aligning our CCI Plus and our future climate space activities to the discussion of our RDG on the accelerators, in particular the one on Space for Green Future. We're also internationally very active. We support ESA's CEO's strategic implementation team chairmanship. We are leading on our interaction with the SCO International Charter. We are talking to GCOS about their new implementation plan, which should be released in 2022. And we will see a first briefing on this one also at our Living Planet symposium in Bonn in 2 minutes' time. We're working very closely with WCRP, and we are active members of various international working groups on climate. Now, looking ahead a little bit, what is the main focus of this year also for us is, of course, to develop further our new climate initiative, Climate Space. This is a program proposal that will go to the Ministerial Council at the end of this year. We're currently presenting this to our program board for Earth observation, so we're talking to our member states about this, but we're also continuing our consultation process with our member states, and we have organized in many of our participating states national climate days to gather feedback and requirements from our member states. There's a number of dedicated studies currently ongoing that help us to define the scope of this new program. One in particular is very important, which is the use of Earth observation in support of the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, and the summary paper is in preparation. We're also working with the European Space Policy Institute to analyze the policies of our member states in terms of climate strategies, in particular adaptation plans that have been put forward by national governments. We also had an interaction with our climate modeling user group. They came up with a foresight report, which is mainly focusing on aspects that are going to be put forward from our modeling counterparts. And this report has been completed and is available from our website. And we're running this recap project, which is looking at greenhouse gas emission quantification using satellite data and comparing these results to the currently mostly used bottom-up approach from our member states. There's only a handful of states that are actually looking into using satellite data as well. The UK being one of them, Switzerland, and I think New Zealand. And we are looking at preparatory studies for our climate space new program. Now, this leads me to my last 3 slides that I wanted to show you to explain a little bit what we're actually planning under climate space and what will come our way once we get the approval and subscription for this program at the end of this year. And then the procurement activities will start in 2023. Now, the International Climate Network is a very populated place, as I said before. To find ESA's role in this one, we did a very thorough analysis of who are the main players and what are the requirements. And ESA's role, I think, in all this is by providing expert input in terms of data and science for climate. In doing so, we need to address the requirements that have been put forward by GCOS in terms of essential climate variables and the associated science to actually retrieve these information. We work very closely, and we have to work very closely with our operational counterparts in terms of R&D and pre-operational development, and we're providing the scientific evidence as input to policy decisions like for UNFCCC Paris Agreement and IPCC. As I said before, we're also working very closely with the hands-on services in this area, so the climate science and modeling institutions and the climate services. And out of all this, we are basically decided to focus in our new climate program in particular on the supporting our member states in their reporting requirements towards the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. So the other 2 main drivers I can see on international policy, climate policy, for me would be the SDG network and the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. But these ones are actually covered by our colleagues in ESRIN. And then recently, on a more European level, of course, we will have to address the requirements put forward under the EU's Green Deal and the requirements for sustainability, and also UN conventions that focus on biodiversity and ecosystems. Now, what we want to do is we would like to basically respond to two major events that are coming our way. One is the UNFCCC Paris Agreement first and second global stocktake, and then on a longer term time frame also to the upcoming assessment reports 7 in about 6 to 7 years. And this leads us to define this new program, Climate Space, over a period of number of years, starting from 2023, and it should go to 2029, up to and including the second UNFCCC Global Stocktake in 2029. I think the one major challenge in all this is going to be to think globally locally. This was a phrase was put forward by one of our CCI science leads, Chris Merchant from the University of Reading, and I think it really summarizes very well what is the major challenge, which is basically to translate global policy and support to policy, like for example the Paris Agreement, into regional and national and local information that is actually actionable. And that's something that is probably the main focus of Climate Space in the future. But I also wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of how this program is going to look like in terms of program structure. Now, we're operating in the International Climate Network. ESA's role in there is to provide input to requirements from international climate networks and drivers, policy, science, working with services and providing evidence, physical evidence for the state of the climate reports. And we're already doing this through our excellence space that we have been establishing for more than a decade now, being based on the essential climate variables and the climate data records that we're producing on our open data portal. And these have been running, and they will be extended also and expanded in future. But they basically provide us with the R&D and the pre-operational development that we need as a basis for any other activity in this program. And this is the 4 pillars that we are actually envisaging for the new program. So we are using this excellence space to also expand on cross-cutting activities. First and foremost, we will support our member states in responding to the requirements of the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. We will also look at more closely linking observation and modeling communities through, for example, hosting the CMIP IPO, but also expanding on our own activities in the climate modeling user group and supporting CMIP in its new phase, 7th phase for their assessments. Thirdly, we will continue our R&D activities, but go a little bit away maybe only from individual ECVs to cross-ECVs, and that's very much in line with what GCOS is proposing in their new updated implementation plan, where they're putting more emphasis, let's say, on cycles, on tipping points, on adaptation activities, and that's very much what we're doing here. And then the last sort of vertical pillar in this program is going to be to provide the physical evidence for the state of the climate reports and IPCC and WMO. We will also continue to have some cross-cutting activities, what we call knowledge exchange, that covers things like data access and curation. It also covers like our website or apps that we are developing or material that is available for everybody for communication, education, and outreach. And we will also continue to be a climate ambassador and basically delivering benefit to the general public through working through our Climate Observation Society. So this is basically what we're looking at. So in over 2022, we will have to successfully implement or present first our new climate initiative, Climate Space, and then thereafter develop the implementation plan that comes with it. We will have to define our contribution and to the accelerator Space for Green Future, for example. We will have to strengthen our link between the individual CCI ECV projects. with the CMIP International Project Office, and there's a number of things that we need to really look at on an international level, working with the likes of CEOS, GEO, IPCC, where we would like to strengthen our interaction with them, and Future Earth and all the Copernicus services. And with that, I would like to stop my presentation, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have.
And if there are no questions, I think we can close the meeting, because we have the B2B appointment starting in actually in 3 minutes, the first ones. So I'd like to thank you, Suzanne, thank also Christophe, thanks all the participants. So you have got the resources or the link to all the presentation which were given today. And I wish you all who have requested a good B2B meeting, and looking forward to talk to you soon. So bye-bye and thanks to everybody.